it's interesting that in my book that I talk a lot about collaboration. My research has been looking recently at collaboration within firms, but I think increasingly it's important to think about collaboration outside firms as well. And that kind of collaboration takes two forms. One is what I would call vertical collaboration, which is with suppliers from whom you are procuring stuff, and also what I would call horizontal collaboration, which is with complementers who provide complementary things that might help you sell your things more effectively. So if you take, for instance, the iPhone, you know, 90+% of the inputs are made by somebody besides Apple. Those are what I would call vertical partnerships. That allows Apple to produce its iPhone and sell it in the market. At the same time, Apple has these 100,000 applications in the application store, done with a loose collaboration with Apple because they have to get approved by Apple and go through a process with Apple. Those are what I would call horizontal partnerships because Apple co-sells them. Apple captures 30% of their revenue from every application that is downloaded. So I think you see a rise of both vertical and horizontal partnerships. I think it's driven by several factors. I think increasingly companies today are discovering that as you face greater product complexity, you simply can't be the best at everything. And you know, there are suppliers out there who will have economies of scale and depth of expertise that you simply can't replicate. And so there's some value to relying on specialists to produce sub-elements of what you might be offering to the customer. And that's where the vertical partnerships, the whole outsourcing wave, and I think it's driven, it used to be driven by cost considerations only. I think increasingly now it's driven by cost and efficacy. So if you look at some of the outsourcing shops in India, even until 5 years ago, their main punchline, their sales pitch used to be, I'm cheaper. Today they all say, no, they don't just say that. They say I'm cheaper and I'm better. So it's that cheaper and better that I can actually provide you something that you can't do yourself, and I'll do it cheaper than you can, I'll do it better than you can. So there's a tremendous movement towards vertical collaboration that arises. At the same time, customers are more demanding and they are expecting what people are calling solutions. Some would call one-stop shop, but it's more than one-stop shop, but kind of an integrated offering. And in that context, you see companies collaborating with complementers who can provide other missing pieces in their offering to create what people are calling a total solution for the customer. And that's where you see a rise of horizontal partnerships. And I think so you see a combination of horizontal and vertical collaboration arising. It helps companies deal with both top line as well as bottom line. It allows them to manage their cost while maintaining their price, grow volume, all through this kind of series of partnerships. Now, the more important point I think to consider is that as we think about partnerships, a skeptic could argue that, come on, some researchers show that 50+% of partnerships fail. So why would I want to hang my hat around something that has a 50+% chance of failing? And that's a valid point. In fact, some would joke that the divorce rate seems to mirror the partnership failure rate in organizations. But I still think that even if, first of all, it's very hard to measure failure. We can quibble about the academics of how many alliances actually fail and don't fail, and what failure is, and failure for whom. But I think the larger point is still that it may be the case that, yes, a fair number of alliances do fail. But if you look at that data by company, not by alliances, what you find is that some companies have a 90% success rate with their alliances, and some companies have a 90% failure rate. So while the average may look like, oh my God, the odds are 50%, and that looks pretty dismal. But I think what we need to learn is, what are those companies that really have mastered this doing? How do they increase the odds? How are they playing a 90% game, not a 10% game? And in light of the fact that if you look at companies today and the role of alliances, it becomes important to learn how to manage your relationships, if you will. You know, companies have CFOs who manage their physical assets, but they don't have anybody to manage their relationships. They don't have a chief relationship officer necessarily. They don't even know how to measure these things. You know, nobody has metrics on them. They do a pretty sloppy job in managing them, and it's no surprise why we have so many of them failing. So it's my belief that I think alliances are here to stay. Alliances are important. But if you're going to make it work, you have to know how to implement. How do you actually form partnerships? How do you screen partners? How do you structure the relationships? How do you adapt and evolve them over time? And of course, also think about how do you exit them when you need to exit them. So in my mind, I think it's absolutely important for companies today to understand relationships, relational capabilities are critical for their success going forward.